Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we present to you from the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. Someone asked me if we were a think tank. I said, no, we're more of a do tank. No more group of people that have managed to get more meaningful legislation put forth in the Commonwealth of Virginia than I can put a finger on. It's why it's my honor to bring this program to you every week across the Commonwealth of Virginia. Find out more about us at tertiumquids.org. Great program this week. Sally Pipes from the Pacific Research Institute coming up in a little while. But we kick it off with a story ripped right from the headlines of our Central Virginia flagship area, and in many ways a story that can repeat itself over and over in our schoolrooms across the Commonwealth. Sean Maguire joins us from the Family Foundation, and thank you so much for joining us, Sean. Welcome to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Joe.
FamilyFoundation.org, of course, is where you find them online. And I was referring to a story that embroiled Central Virginia in controversy, where a group whose mission is to prevent and to help those who are victims of sexual assault allowed one of their staffers, along with some perhaps not very attentive school administrators, to put forth a program that they touted as healthy relationship training, which was bordered on what most parents called pornography, where a young millennial blogger was actually instructing these children how to perform various sexual acts via video in a schoolroom setting, as if it was educational. And those who would claim outrage over this is simply put, I mean, this is not something a classroom should be doing, especially as we watch our SOL scores across the Commonwealth slide. We should be spending perhaps all that time maybe teaching a little bit more English, math, and science.
That's right. This was out of western Albemarle County. The school district there didn't pre-approve these videos that were shown to classrooms of 14, 15-year-old girls describing how to pleasure your sexual partner. There's nothing about this that matches any of the SOLs for family life education at all. It is all about pleasuring them sexually, and it's videos that I'm not able to watch comfortably. So as I'm working on this issue and bringing it to attention, I can't actually watch the content because it's nature is so disturbing to me.
Well, and even that, it was under the banner of a sexual assault group that was trying to fight this. And I said, I was a 14 and 15-year-old kid once. This is making me want to, and would perhaps even, in some cases, with those who didn't perhaps have a grasp on reality, suborn the idea of sexual assault. The covet becomes overwhelming in some cases, and I think you're actually flying counter-purpose to even the sexual assault groups, never mind the schools.
Correct. What passes as a family life education curriculum today is really quite concerning across the Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. Families, parents, and concerned citizens in Fairfax did a comprehensive review of the 80 hours of family life education content that is provided for students there across the course of their education. And they found all kinds of content that raises major red flags for the vast majority of parents about what their children are being exposed to in those classrooms. There's nothing related to the standards of learning, the SOLs on family life education, when you're talking about anal sex and gender ideology and telling students that sex is assigned at birth rather than biologically determined.
Well, Sean, and this is what strikes me, and you point out very eloquently that Virginia law, the Department of Education, requires that parents have the right to review this kind of curricula. When I look at this stuff, to me, a course that's under the banner Family Life is about responsibility, teamwork, how to make the household function, and who's doing what, and it's those sorts of things that I don't care what the they're almost a unintentionally gender neutral. Who's making the income, budgeting, finances, responsibilities to the house, responsibilities to the children, responsibilities of the children. That's, to me, a family life curricula. Am I just stuck in the 1800s or what?
Well, I don't think you're stuck in the 1800s. What should be taught to children on these very sensitive topics should be, at the very least, done with the informed consent of parents who are actively involved and engaged in their children's education. And Virginia law, as you mentioned, gives parents the right to review this curriculum and also gives them the right to opt their child out of any curriculum before it's provided. What happened in West Albemarle clearly violated that. These videos were not pre-approved, and they were not actually distributed to parents before they were shown to the students. But in most cases, parents should be able to review the curriculum in the school districts in advance of those classes being undertaken. So that's what parents in Fairfax have done, and they did that comprehensive review. Parents in Loudoun County also got together and did a review, and they've made their results public so that other parents don't have to go through the process of going into the school, looking at every piece of the FLE curriculum. And what we are doing at the Family Foundation is we're connecting with parents across the Commonwealth and every school district to have them do the same thing with their school. So they can go in, review the content, gather it together, look at what they're actually teaching students in these classrooms, and then, give other parents a distilled and really easy to look at summary so that parents will know, hey, I should actually look into this a little bit more carefully on this topic because I see this is what's being included in that education. And so parents who have any ideas, like whether they're religious or they're sensitive to cultural issues or they have any other position that they have that would make them uncomfortable with their children, being exposed to these very sensitive family topics at a young age, that they can make those decisions rather than the school district making those decisions.
We're visiting on Freedom and Prosperity Radio this week with Sean Maguire from the Family Foundation, familyfoundation.org. Sean, you mentioned that you guys are putting together this network and through that becomes a toolkit and an empowerment session where parents across the Commonwealth can join together and at least see how other parents have gone before them and done it and add to that wiki, as you would, of knowledge and experiences of instances where they've, whatever challenges they may have found with the school boards as well. And it's such a holistic point to it because often we look at school board elections and things like that as places where these changes can be at least pressured. You mentioned the Western Albemarle. This was a decision that was approved by a mid-level teacher that had no technical authority to make those decisions. Well, that comes from the top, and who's dictating to the school superintendent who can and can't make these decisions and what kind of flexibility. But parents who are engaged all the time don't need to worry for November elections and things like that. So what would be your tips to a parental group listening in Roanoke or Lynchburg or wherever they are to get these groups put together?
First thing is to contact us at the Family Foundation. I'd love to talk with them in more detail about the process. I can point out that there is the code in the Virginia Code actually lays out the procedure for reviewing the content of the curriculum. Parents are able to go into the school library and review the curriculum, as well as descriptions of any videos used in the classrooms. From there, I would really recommend that they get a group of parents that they know from different perspectives, whether they have parents who are in the medical profession or who would understand a bit about the medical jargon used in the classrooms, and then look at it all together and discuss where concerns are and then just evaluate it as objectively as possible to say, hey, these are some concerns, and put that together. But if they don't know a group of parents that can do that, it's a great thing to gather together as a team to look at. Doing it all on your own could really take quite a bit of your time, but when you have 5 or 6 people together, it makes it really a great effort and easy work. So the Family Foundation is a great place to go and contact so that we can get those parents from the same school district together to do those reviews.
And you said it so perfectly, Sean. And, the more hands make lighter work, but also, contacting you, you can help with some of the trepidations. I'm sure there
Absolutely.
are parents who are listening saying, oh, I don't know if I want to, and then you worry about stigmatizing a kid that says, oh, well, you have to leave, Steve, because you're not, and your parents, and you understand what I'm saying is a lot of parents are going to feel that queasiness about wanting to step out into doing this and knowing that you guys are there. Is that one of the first qualms you kind of have to get a parent past to do this? They want to, they know it's the right thing to do, but they just don't know if it's a good idea or how to start?
The school districts are required to have this information available. Sometimes they're surprised when parents actually go and take advantage of the law. But once they get past that initial question, it is really quite an easy process to get access to all of this curriculum. So while it does serve as causes some trepidation to initially contact those school districts, as soon as you take the first step, it's really quite easy from there. And getting other parents to join you, as soon as you say, well, I have all the curriculum, would you join me for a review evening and we can look it over and discuss it? So it gets much easier as you go along.
Well, and let me then follow up on that. What have you heard from parents as you build this network regarding the schools and their willingness to follow Virginia law? Because I can imagine in some areas that you would get, and we've seen it in our own personal experiences around here, the school sort of acting like, oh, no, you sweetie, you don't have the right to see that, or they've tried to do the brush off to parents who are trying to see this, wondering if there's a way to make sure you know what the code is and know, and with no uncertain terms, don't get blown off of this.
Absolutely. And when the Virginia code states explicitly, and I can share with any parents that code section and provide that exact language, but also the Virginia Department of Education has put out regulations making it very clear that any parent has the right to review this material in the school district. So it's very, very easy to do it. As soon as you just bring that language to the school district, I haven't seen any others give more resistance after that. You just, hey, this is the law, this is the requirement. I'd like to review the material. And most schools are immediately able to provide the material. A lot of schools are just they don't have it available to review right away, and they say we don't have it. We have to go get that ready because they have different providers like this sexual assault awareness group that did the videos. They're outside groups that are being brought into the school, and so a lot of school districts don't know what is going to be provided in advance, which clearly doesn't match the requirements of the law, that it has to be available for review in advance of the classes. So that's the main problem, is schools don't have the content, and this having parents go in and ask for it, it puts pressure on the schools to prepare the material in advance. But as long as parents are doing this in a respectful manner, just being an ally of the school district where their children are, rather than being an antagonist, I think a lot of schools have appreciated that we are looking into this so that they are more conscious of what's being provided to students.
Sean, you make a great point about how you approach somebody is so important to, the Tony Robbins sort of esque, the secret to getting good answers is asking good questions. You mentioned the outsourcing, though, of a lot of this material. Do you find that family life education curriculum is more frequently than not outsourced more than math or English or those kind of things? Because that seems to be problematic, that the school, and never mind whether or not they should be teaching this thing, but now they're even outsourcing it.
Yes, I don't know of a time when it wasn't outsourced in large degree. The Family Foundation was founded over these concerns back in 1983 when Walt Barbie, our founder, was concerned about what was being taught in family life education classrooms, and he looked into it, and from that concern, more and more parents joined together to promote family values and in our public policy. So it's always been a problem. Looking at this video as just a case example from West Albemarle, that video is from YouTube, and the teachers just pulled it at the suggestion of SARA, the sexual assault group. They pulled those videos and showed them in the classroom, but that blogger is funded by groups that are connected and affiliates with Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of comprehensive sex education curriculum around the world, and they're always providing, through different means and different affiliates, the opportunity for schools to have this content included in their classrooms. So I don't know of any schools that have developed their own curriculum. They always have curriculum given to them from somewhere else that they're utilizing. And, one positive thing here, Joe, is that there's a group of Pregnancy Resource Center that has developed a sex education curriculum that meets the standards of the Family Life Education SOLs, and school districts are able to adopt that, which is a risk avoidance sex education curriculum, which matches the goals of our legislature.
Well, we have great ones in Roanoke, I know, and Charlottesville, I know, the Pregnancy Center of Central Virginia as well. And I don't know if you're talking about the Worth Your Weight program or just something that grew out of that, but we even saw grade point averages increase as kids participated in those kind of programs. And I always find it to be one of the sad ironies and one of the more typical cases of left wing. We'll name it something that's just anathema to what it actually is.
Right.
But if you were actually helping kids plan for parenthood, we'd actually have better families, because nobody is spending 1 minute helping kids understand the responsibilities of parenthood. We're just teaching them how the biology happens, and I got to imagine nature has been taking care of that for millennia. Sean, let's learn the responsibility. And I've talked to gay couples who said, you know what, we don't understand. We need help being parents, and we need places to go to talk to people about how to be a responsible parent, and those are the conversations that our kids should be learning. Is what is the responsibility of parenthood, and what does a family life mean, and what does it mean to be a responsible parent, and those things. That's the education our kids need, and certainly they need it at home. And I'm glad you're helping the parents out to do this. Is there a phone number way to contact you, Sean, or is there a better email address, or can they download some of this stuff, toolkit, from the Family Foundation website? Yeah,
the best place to go is familyfoundation.org/FLE for Family Life Education. If you go to our familyfoundation.org, you can contact me through email at sean@familyfoundation.org, or the phone number here is 804-343-0010. And just connecting with the Family Foundation will be able to put you any parents in contact with other parents from their community. And if there's already a toolkit for their family life education, we can give it to them. But if there isn't one, we'll encourage them to join the team that's going to be reviewing that actively as the curriculums are formed, and as school districts make changes to their curriculum, we always need to keep it in constant review. The other thing that parents will find at familyfoundation.org/FLE is a petition that we're going to be presenting to the General Assembly this year, asking them to promote or to pass legislation making family life education an opt-in curriculum rather than opt-out.
Okay.
Currently, parents are given an opportunity to opt their children out of the curriculum for any reason. Mm-hmm. However, that gives the presumption that students in the classrooms will be going to the class unless the parent proactively takes action to opt them out. Mm-hmm. We want to reverse that and make it presumed that children will not be exposed to this curriculum because the parents have the primary role of the education and upbringing of their children. And so unless the parent proactively opts in, the child won't be exposed to this curriculum. So that petition's also being circulated, and we would appreciate any parents who agree that they should have the primary responsibility and schools should not be able to expose children to FLE curriculum without the express approval of parents, to go ahead and take a minute and sign that petition at familyfoundation.org/FLE.
Well, Sean, I'm old enough to remember the first controversies over teaching sex ed in, now I guess it's family life education, but when I was in high school and middle and junior high school so long ago, and the presumption was, well, we have to teach this because we need to curb teen pregnancies and things like that. But teen pregnancies have exploded. They've gone up every year since, and now we find that suicide is the number 2 leading cause of death of children 10 to 16. I'm thinking, we're failing our kids in terms of giving them the tools necessary to get along with the challenges while we're teaching them about a biological function that they've been able to figure out for a long time on their own, and we need to start rethinking this.
Right, and as we mentioned earlier about Fairfax curriculum specifically, it's not only teaching children about the biological function, it's now teaching children that biology doesn't matter, that gender identity is being taught as something that's separate from your biological nature. So this is an ideological message. It's not based in science. It's supported by an ideological presumption. But that's going to cause confusion for children at best, and it's offensive to children coming from any home, whether they're Muslim or Christian or otherwise, who teaches children about the distinct roles of male and female. And that's going to cause extra stress on children at young ages,
Sean,
as they're impressionable. Yes.
We got to run. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. FamilyFoundation.org. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Welcome back to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Promise you one of our favorite people, although at this point I really had held out hope years ago that we'd be talking to Sally Pipes about, boy, aren't we glad we fixed the problems with our healthcare system. Of course, the Pacific Research Team, Sally Pipes, and welcome back to the program, Sally, and you can find her, of course, at pacificresearch.org. How are you doing this week?
I'm fine, Joe, and thank you very much for having me back. Never a dull moment in the healthcare space, as you say. I mean, I thought by 2011 it would be over and we'd be singing the praises of free markets in healthcare, and but it's just gone on and on. It seems to go, from bad to worse when you think about what Bernie Sanders has been able to do to, pull people together and support, a single-payer Medicare for all system.
Well, and then, even some of the left-wing fringe media blog sites like Vox just disembowel the idea, saying, well, hold on a second here. This technically would cost more money than exists on the planet right now to do all these things. And yet they still just trundle on happily, flouncing through the woods, singing this song that somewhere somebody's got all this money that the poor people don't have, and it's because of them. And I don't know where to. I feel like the guy who just walked into a basement in a tenement building in a city and sees cockroaches everywhere, and he just feels like, I don't know which one to start stomping on.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, really, the polling. In the Washington Post Kaiser poll that came out earlier this year, it showed that just over 50% of Americans supported Medicare for all, single payer, and of that, about 74% of Democrats did. But, when you ask people, well, you want to have free health care, as Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and their little army of people running around supporting this, ask them, well, would you support it if you had significant increases in your taxes? And the polling drops about 20%. I mean, and look what happened in Vermont, Bernie Sanders' own state, when the Democratic governor, Mr. Shumlin, who had signed a single-payer bill in the state of Vermont in 2011, and in December 2014, he had to withdraw it because he said the people of Vermont couldn't afford the payroll tax and income tax increases that it would cost.
Hello, absolutely. And it seems like every time they turn around, and by the way, I should point out, we're going to share this. Sally's authored a piece that Forbes has published as well regarding this, and it's under the banner, the progressives seem to lie their way to victory. But when caught doing this, they say, oh, well, it's because they didn't add in the rich people in this state or that state. state. And certainly Vermont alone can't do it. That's why we have to do it nationwide. And then you do it nationwide and you say, well, we need it globally. I listened to a socialist here in Charlottesville talk about it. He said, well, the problem with communism is that we need global communism. As long as there's no alternative to communism, communism will finally succeed and we'll have nirvana or whatever, or the tribulation or something is going to happen once we get global communism, because then the rich people won't have any place to hide, which seems to be Bernie Sanders and Ms. Ocasio-Cortez's argument is, sure, here we don't have enough money, but once we figure out where all those rich people are hiding their money, we'll get it.
Right, and of course there won't be any more rich people because eventually, there won't be any more, as Mrs. Thatcher used to say, any more other people's money.
Yeah.
One of the things back in 2016 when Sanders was running against Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination for the presidency, he came out with his first real push for Medicare for All bill. And of course, he never said, A, how much will it cost, and B, who's going to pay for it. And, the left-wing Urban Institute came out and said, well, we see our forecast shows that it would cost, $32 billion over 10 years, 32 trillion over 10 years, which would be about 3.2 trillion a year, which is what we spend on healthcare in the whole country today. But Bernie never wants to talk about that or the tax increases, or worse. As you know, I'm Canadian and grew up under single payer. The ultimate thing is the rationing of care, the long waiting times for care, and the fact that doctors will retire early. We're already seeing that, or they will shift to another profession, or they will move out of one state to another that doesn't have single payer if it came in a state like California.
And doesn't it take the care out of health care? Because if you're just a government employee and you've been assigned to be the doctor for this town, you have no vested interest. You didn't pursue a medical career because it was your passion and you wanted to help people get better from the things that ail them. You're there because it's the job that you showed aptitude for, and you really are just, I don't want to say mailing it in, but you don't have the passion that somebody who dedicated and made their choices to be a medical professional. Well,
if you look at the polling, the Association of American Medical Colleges just came out with their latest poll showing that by 2030 there would be a shortage of 121,000 doctors. That's
God.
up 16% over what they polled a year ago, and it's because a lot of docs are, as I say, retiring early because of Obamacare, because of electronic health records, all of the paperwork. And if the government takes over the healthcare system, Charles Blayhouse at Mercatus has done a great job showing a net almost $33 trillion over 10 years, and that's lower than it would be because he's projecting lower administrative costs and lower drug costs. But who's ever seen a government program? I say that costs less than what they predict. I predict that if we get Medicare for all in this country, it'll be a lot more than $32 trillion over 10 years. And, as you say, people that work in insurance companies processing claims and signing people up, the government would have to hire, people to do this, and they're probably not going to be nearly as efficient or hardworking as people who are in the private sector. And my cousin, who's a doctor, says, well, why is it that people, he's in Canada, why is it that people in the U.S. think that they're going to be paid any faster by the government? I have to submit all my claims to the government. It takes forever to get paid, and they determine what I'm going to be paid for every single procedure.
And you can't really debate the government. I've seen people who try to fight City Hall, but in this case, they're going to say, here's what we're paying you, and you will like it. Sally, you bring up something, though, back in the salad days, as the late 90s, the early 2000s, when the Democrats would say, look at how efficient Medicaid is, and it's so much more efficient than HMOs, and that's how the cost savings will come. But that didn't pencil out, because as it scaled up each year, more and more people, that bell curve started to change, and it stopped being such an efficiently run bureaucracy, if that's not an oxymoronic statement in the first place. But their argument late in the 90s, early in the 2000s, was that the government healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, was much more efficient than an HMO, but that hasn't scaled up as predicted.
Well, no, when Hillary was around with Hillary Care, and she had her giant that giant map about how, but it was all going to come down to government was actually going to be the controlling force. And Medicare, when it came into being in 1965, July 31st, 1965, it cost $3 billion in the first year. Lyndon LBJ, the president who founded the Great Society, predicted Medicare would cost $12 billion in 1990. In effect, it cost $110 billion. And so, all of these government programs, they become very, very inefficient. There's a lot of fraud. And the people that are, working in these programs have no interest in making sure that things are working well. They just, they're really public servants. And I was doing a show several years ago, just after Obamacare came in, and a lady called in from a place in Wisconsin. She was in the lineup at the post office, and there were 3 wickets, but only one was open. All these people were standing around, stomping their feet, trying to get their postage stamps or mail their packages. And she said, she stepped out of the line and said, well, if you think it's frustrating being at the post office, what'll it be like when we get Medicare for all or single payer? You'll be really upset when you can't get an appointment with your doctor. And I think people have to think about this because government will have to deal with the demand for healthcare being much greater than the supply. And the U.S. will just be like England and Canada, countries that have huge waiting lists. And today in Canada, the average Canadian waits over 5 months from seeing a primary care doc to treatment by a specialist.
The DMV, the post office, all of these things, this is what medical care is going to be. And it sort of started me on a path where I realized that a lot of left-wing progressive rhetoric is based on the idea that unless the government forces you to do something, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't help a homeless person. You wouldn't care for the elderly. You wouldn't, give health care unless the government forces you to. And I think at a dark place in my psyche, that's what infuriates me the most, Sally, about it, is this attitude that if they don't force us to do something, we won't do it, as if it wasn't a government regulation that created the HMOs and gave them the hall pass on creating their little monopoly anyway, and created the subsidy that has driven up the cost of health care.
Well, exactly. I mean, under Obamacare, which, as you know, was not, the Republicans were not able to repeal it and replace it last fall.
Huge
which
problem.
They had promised to do when they were, running for office, and so I am pleased with some of the things that President Trump has done in opening up the healthcare market with the short-term limited duration plans, which now can be bought for a year and then renewed for up to 3 years. They were pushed back to 3 months under Obama, and then the association health plans where people will be able to group together and sole proprietors. But of course, people like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are going around saying, "Oh, this is junk insurance. It's sabotage of Obamacare." Well, as you say, the premiums under Obamacare, were so high, the deductibles so high that a lot of people that had exchange coverage, of which only about 11 million Americans in all actually bought exchange coverage, they couldn't afford to use their care. And we turned the whole healthcare industry and market upside down to deal with about 11 million people in this country out of 330 million.
Well, and again, it reminds us that the word insurance is actually a misnomer. You and I have talked about this, Sally. Really what we're buying these days is health assurance. I mentioned this to a friend of mine who lives in Manhattan, and I said, you don't own a car because you can get around in mass transit and whatnot, so do you have to pay automobile insurance? No, of course not. I said, well, this is like saying to somebody you have to buy automobile insurance whether you drive or not. This is health assurance, not insurance.
Well, exactly, and we've certainly, I think, there's a lot of court cases now going on because of the individual mandate was getting rid of the individual mandate was part of the last December's tax bill, and of course it will no longer be in effect in January 2019. But the progressives and people on the left are just saying this is going to completely destroy our healthcare system. The people will be dying in the streets. But in fact, a lot of the young, invincible people didn't buy coverage, and they paid that individual mandate of $695 or 2.5% of income because that was cheaper than buying a plan on the exchange which costs them, $245 to $300 a month for coverage that they didn't want.
Exactly.
And they're subsidizing people who did buy on the exchange who are older and sicker, and they said no thanks.
Well, and you mentioned association plans, and here in Virginia, of all things, we had a delegate, Steve Landis, worked very hard at creating a law that would permit the direct primary care associations, like Atlas Medicine is one of the more famous nationwide ones, thanks to talk radio, but allowing Virginia medical practices to do that. And it was even signed into law by, of all people, Terry McAuliffe. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. I don't know. Maybe he thought somebody was asking for his autograph. I don't know. But he signed it. And so we have the opportunity, and what I'm bringing you this up is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is speaking to poor people in Astoria and the Bronx, saying, you can't afford health care because it's $1,000 for a medical visit. Here's the answer. These sorts of things, create an affordable place where a poor person or a person working at $30,000 or $40,000 a year job can afford to go see a doctor.
Well, right. It's about opening up the market to more competition, not less. And, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and there's several other people who are, running across the country. Cynthia Nixon is running against Cuomo for the Democratic nomination for governor, all these single-payer people. They're talking about closing the market down to being government being the only provider of health care. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, some of the things that Mr. President Trump has done is opening the market up, and direct primary care is another perfect example of a program that would help so many people and not have to deal with, the insurance middleman. And, all of these are options. And as Alex Azar, Secretary of HHS, has said on so many occasions, short-term plans aren't for everybody. Association health plans aren't for everyone. But let's let people decide what is the type of plan that works for them.
Well, and let's not even talk about, hopefully, at some point, fixing the health savings account mess as well, Sally. So where do we wind up? Here in Virginia, we just, all of a sudden trying to catch a train that's halfway out of the station said, oh, no, we want to get on the Medicaid expansion train. And all these Republicans were bribed by the had campaign contributions from the hospital unions to push for this, to push Medicaid expansion in Virginia. How do we put the genie back in the bottle? Because I'm afraid it's going to collapse and we're going to be left with an Ocasio-Cortez, Sanders, Leslie Coburn led idea. She's a 5th District congressional candidate here in Virginia that's pushed for Medicaid for all as well. She said, oh, yeah, I love that idea. I mean, even Tim Kaine has sort of said it's compelling, but he won't jump on the train so much. So does it fulfill the predictions back in the beginning of Obamacare that really the goal was to collapse the medical care system and then leave us with nothing but? Or do you think the Trump administration and Secretary Azar can, pardon the torturing the medical metaphor, resuscitate it?
Well, I think as long as President Trump is still the president, which I assume he will be up until January of 2021, it's going to be very hard for, people on the Bernie Sanderses of the world to actually get a true single-payer plan. But certainly it is a big push in these midterm elections. And I think then going forward, if the Democrats take the House, or I actually think right now they probably won't. I think the Republicans will keep the Senate, but they're going to be pushing really hard for this all over the country for the 2020 presidential. I think it's going to be, as the polls show now, healthcare is the number one issue on people's minds. It's not jobs, it's not immigration. It's really, or the economy. It's healthcare, and so we're going to have to work really hard educating Americans between these midterm elections and the presidential in 2020, because Bernie and his team are just hot to go. And you've got 16 senators now, Democratic senators who support Medicare for all. You have this new Medicare for All caucus, which has 70 members, Medicare for all, 137 House members, Medicare for all. So we have to tell the American people and let them know, A, it's not free. Canadians, Bernie says, Canadians have free health care. The Fraser Institute's latest study that came out a few weeks ago shows that the average Canadian family of 4 pays $13,000 a year in hidden taxes for a healthcare system where they have to wait sit on a waiting list for over 5 months in order to see a specialist after they've seen a primary care doc.
Holy
so
cow.
we have to let people know that this is what will happen when government runs healthcare, and they're going to have to pay much higher taxes. And as you said, Mr. Playhouse pointed out that even if you doubled all of the corporate income taxes and personal income taxes, it would not be enough to cover a government takeover of healthcare at $3.2 trillion a year. And I can tell you right now, the price is going to be much more than $3.2 trillion, just like it was in Medicare when it came into being and moved forward.
The question is this what really is behind this seeming zeal for the Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen, Manafort chases of everything that could possibly bring the president down to earth and put him back into his box and to stop him from being able to do this and to win the midterms by guilt by association? That's what I feel like this zeal is behind, because there are so many of these things that people were banking on happening that now aren't happening. That's what's created this blood sport out of it.
Well, it's absolutely, there's two issues. One is the issue of all of this craziness going on with Manafort and Cohen and Stormy Daniels. And then you have to look at what are some of the things for the economy that President Trump has done. And we've seen, as I mentioned, some of the things, executive orders in healthcare, the individual mandate going down starting next year.
Right to try.
You've got Mr. Gorsuch on the court. Unemployment is at a very low level. The unemployment rate among minorities is at an all-time low. For the economy, there's, the stock market is booming, but there is, I think, this push to get out into the press all of this craziness that is really not about running the country or our economy. We want a strong economy in this country, but these diversions are really exhausting, and who cares?
Well, and then
I
the
just find it a distraction.
Some of the polls are indicating that the harder they hit with this, the more the American people are, saying, you know what, I'm fine with the president's job right now, the job approval of administering the government of the country. And you even see in the black community, he's up to 39% in the most recent Rasmussen poll of support in the black community. Last time a Republican did that, I think he won 49 states in his reelection campaign. So the midterms, the people in these midterm races need to be looking at that, Sally.
Right, exactly. And I think, as I say, the other issue is this, the Dems have really split themselves on this issue of Medicare for all and support for Medicare for all. 5 years ago, Medicare for all, single payer, was just sort of an idea of
quaint,
progressive and what Mr. Obama really wanted. But now, boy, this is the central issue that we have to work so hard to educate Americans on what it would mean for their health care. And when they find out, they won't like it.
What about this walk away movement, the hashtag walk away, and all these Democrats that are saying, I'm not in this party anymore? Is this something we should be reaching out to the Tea Parties? I know some of the Northern Virginia Tea Parties have held events with the walk away clubs up there and saying, hey, listen, we get it. And it's an interesting coalition of people who say we're taxed enough already. We want marketplaces. We want people taken care of, and we're seeing that it's not that. And they've seen the ugly side of the way far right and the way far left. And is there an interesting, compelling gestalt going on with this?
Well, I hope so. I think, as the Democrats move further and further to the left, I think they are going to lose a lot of people, particularly, Democrats in Middle America, that really they want jobs. They want to feel good about themselves. So this is a chance for the Republican Party and the Tea Party to pick up people that really want a strong economy and want good health care, but they don't want the government running their lives. Bernie Sanders, when he talks about free health care, free education, free this, free that, next thing it'll be free housing, free food. This is really a push towards making America a total entitlement society. And this is not what this country was built upon.
No, the totalitarianism, if these kids marching in Charlottesville think there's a police state now, wait till it's totalitarian and you have to give somebody, the fruits of your labor, and if you don't, you go to jail. I'd love to just, but they don't want to listen. They just want to get their megaphones out and yell. Sally Pipes is the president of the Pacific Research Institute. She's seen healthcare from the government-run side. She's trying to be a Klaxon. Sally, one of these days we'll be able to sit down, have a beverage, and talk about the boy. Remember that fight against Obamacare? Boy, that was tough. But hopefully we can all we veterans of this battle will be able to sit back and say, I'm glad we finally won. Stayed the day. But I do appreciate everything you do there.
Well, thank you so much, Joe, and take care. And we will continue to chat.
Oh, and Pacific Research, would be pacificresearch.org. Read her stuff there. And, of course, the column at Forbes.com as well. Have a great weekend, and thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you, Joe. Bye.
And thank you for listening this week, and for all of us this Labor Day weekend from the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. Thank you for your labors. Thank goodness we have more people working than in decades prior, and giving people a chance to say, hold it, now I have money in my pocket. I might be able to take care of my own medical costs, and beyond that as well. For all of us at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, so long, and thanks for all the fish.